Nelson Mandela and his role in apartheid. The knife of apartheid dug deep into the heart of South Africa, leaving many wounded in its wake of destruction. But from the devastation rose the broken country's savior, Nelson Mandela. Even after his country turned its back on him, Mandela tirelessly fought for the freedom of the people of South Africa. Despite political violence and countless arrests, Mandela was able to sustain an unbreakable spirit, provoking acts of defiance against the oppressive apartheid regime. Nelson Mandela is one of the greatest leaders of the 20th century, creating the need for the recognition of this hero. After my speech today, you will know about Mandela's early life and the foundations of apartheid, the apartheid regime, and how Mr. Mandela was involved in the destruction of this regime. Mandela was born July 18, 1918, in the middle of political turmoil. Diamonds were discovered in the newly Dutch colonized Orange Free State in Transvaal, sparking an English invasion of the land. This assault resulted in the Boer War, separating the two parliamentary powers of South Africa. Being neither Dutch nor English descent, Mandela was able to avoid the war's destruction and instead attended South African Native College to study law. He later passed the qualification exam to become a lawyer. Meanwhile, the Dutch gained independence from England, resulting in the power share between the two countries. This held until the Dutch Afrikaner National Party was able to gain majority in the early 1940s. Strategists in the National Party created apartheid as a way to secure their dominance over the economic and social system of South Africa. After the first acts of apartheid, Mandela established South Africa's first black law practice, specializing in cases resulting in the post-apartheid legislation. Also, that year, Mandela played a key role in the campaign of defiance against the pass laws, which required non-whites to carry documentation authorizing their presence in government-restricted areas. In 1955, he was involved in drafting the Freedom Charter, a document calling for a non-racial social democracy in South Africa. Mandela's anti-apartheid activism led him towards multiple arrests, the first being in 1956 on charges of treason against the government. He was later acquitted in 1961, but then was rearrested in 1963 for founding the illegal African National Congress military department. He was sentenced with life imprisonment after the police raid found arms and equipment at the ANC African National Congress's military base. I've mentioned the word apartheid numerous times now, so you're probably wondering, what is apartheid? Well, in South Africa, apartheid meant that racial discrimination was now institutionalized, in this case against black-skinned people. Initially, the idea of apartheid started small, but the numerous acts accumulated to what was known as Grand Apartheid in about 1960s. The first act was the Population Registration Act of 1950. The Population Registration Act required that all South Africans be racially classified into one of three categories: white, black, or colored, a mix of descents such as Asians or Indians or anything other than white or black Africans. The colored category include major subgroups of Indians and Asians. Classifications into these categories were based on appearance, social acceptance, and descent. The next sizable act was the Black African Homeland Act of 1951. Homelands were independent states to which each African was assigned by the government according to their record of origin. All political rights, including voting, held by an African were restricted to the designated homeland. The idea was that they would be citizens of the homeland, losing their citizenship in South Africa and any right of involvement with the South African Parliament. The final act that sealed the fate of South Africa under Grand Apartheid was the Public Safety Act and Criminal Law Amendment of 1953. This act empowered the government to declare stringent states of emergency and increased penalties for protesting against or supporting the repeal of law. The penalties included fines, imprisonment, and whippings and other means of torture. Under Grand Apartheid, these penalties increased sizably, just another disadvantage to the growing regime. At this point, colored South Africans had given up all hope for an equal future. In 1989, a ray of sunshine was cast down upon the bleak situation. F.W. de Klerk of the National Party was elected into office. De Klerk got to work right away dismantling the apartheid regime. His first order of business was to legalize the ANC, the African National Congress, which in turn deemed Mandela's sentencing unconstitutional and freed him from prison in 1991. Shortly after his return, Mandela was elected leader of the African National Congress. In 1994, the ANC was elected into office, in turn making Mr. Mandela the first black president of South Africa. In 1995, Mandela established the Truth and Reconciliation Committee in hope of creating peace in the heavily divided South Africa. Under this system, amnesty could be granted towards applicants that met the requirements of the committee. After endless reconstruction, Thabo Mbeki succeeded Mandela in 1999 after Mandela chose not to run for a second term. The life of this amazing man was no easy one, including torture, imprisonment, violence, and death. But in the end, Nelson Mandela rose above the rest and reshaped South Africa into the beautiful country that it now is. Be inspired by Nelson Mandela's words and actions to fight for what is right. He has taught us that even if it is at the cost of your life, you should stand up for what you believe in and only come back stronger when you are knocked down. Our world has been shaped by racism and war, and the story of Nelson Mandela and South African apartheid is just one example of many.